In this study, it is qualitative. It was a small N, 22 inmates in a Northwestern prison, and 4 chaplains within the same prison system. Religious conversion in prison and tendencies of identity, many forms of identity. There's the individual's understanding of their own identity, and the placement of their identity within something larger. Could be the religious community identity as well as the secular world view identity. In other words, what we interact with in our daily lives outside of our religious dimension. And the question, of course, was what is the role of religion and conversion within the prison setting among those incarcerated? Does it really help to bring back assistance and help us to overcome some of the problems that we face, particularly in America, of recidivism? Or in light of a lot of the discussions that are going on in the media, a lot of the governmental agency reports that have come out regarding the worries and concerns of radicalization among those that are being converted to Islam was a question. So in entering into the particular study, there were a couple of rationales behind this. There was the academic call, which goes along the line of using religion as a treatment program within the incarcerated individual's life to help them to develop a pro-social outlook, and then in that way to help them to desist from crime once they re-enter into society. One area that particularly attracted me was some of the studies by O'Connor, numerous ones since 2004, as well as Shadmaruna in his discussion of deep narrative in helping individuals that are incarcerated to share and to actually reflect upon their own lives through their self-narratives and recounts of their life in the transformative process. And then there was the social call. Surely with the issue that comes about through concerns over safety and the prison setting being a place of radicalization through conversion, I questioned that because I couldn't find any true data on it. I couldn't find comparative studies looking at those converts to Christianity compared to converts to Islam. Again, they were not broken down by the individual sex. It was just Islam, etc. And at the same time, where safety is a legitimate concern, I mean, if those things do go on, we do need to be aware of it. At the same time, there's the constitutional issue of the need to be able to worship and to express your religious values as you need to have. Even as late following 9/11, 2008, a report came out from the U.S. Congress stating that there need to be caution in evaluating the effects of conversion to Islam in prison, because this could be stifling some of the very few rights that prisoners still have within the incarcerated setting. And if I transgress every once in a while and say prisoner, don't take that as a disparaging remark, because in my narratives and interviews with these individuals, over 90% of them said, we would prefer that you not call us inmates in your questions. We're not inmates, we are prisoners. And we need to identify with that so that we can have that to overcome. And so if I digress and say that from time to time, it's because I'm trying to honor something that they requested, in other words, to give them some voice in an otherwise unrecognized setting. So the literature was short. There was a shortfall. We could find literature on conversion in prison, but often and usually it dealt with Christianity. We could find a lot of studies on conversion in the free world, usually to Christianity. Very few studies on Islam, particularly in incarcerated settings. So I said, well, if I'm going to test this, that means I'm going to have to go out and collect some of my own data, which, as you know, presents a problem in going into a prison and actually interviewing the inmates. So that was overcome, but my questions were in this research, what are the social as well as the personal reasons given by the men themselves? And I did limit this to men in this particularly study, and it needs to be expanded also to the females. And second, how are inclusivist or exclusivist religious community identities formed? Well, the religious community identity is one social setting of which we all interact if we identify ourselves in a religious context. And then moreover, how those identities, the development of those identities, are justified by the participants. Inclusivist being the basic definition for religion. In other words, the inclusivist would say, I believe that my religious means to the divine is best. However, I recognize that there are other legitimate means to the divine. The exclusivist, on the other hand, define in its common terms that mine is the only way and all others fall short of reaching divinity. And then the third question was, how are incorporationist or rejectionist worldviews formed? And this would be the secular world that we all navigate in some degree and form each day. Within the prison setting, it would be the prison system, the guards, the administration, the rules, the regulations, etc. And then how those are justified. Now, the incorporationist is a cooperative relationship with the world, irregardless of whether I'm inclusive or exclusive in my community, religious community identity. Am I cooperative with those other structures about me? Whereas the rejectionist is one, and it took two forms. Either I'm indifferent to the larger world and I'll live within my religious community. This might be the person that kind of backs away from society and drops out, or is very passive towards the things that are going on in the world, as well as the one that takes an active stance that may use legal means. And then on the far extreme of the rejectionists would be those that are very active but would use extra legal means to change society, which we might classify as violence or terrorism or other forms of radicalization that might be sanctioned somehow through their understanding of who they are, what their religious community identity is, as well as their relationship to the broader world community. So those were the three questions, and if we want to visualize these as they played out in the themes in the qualitative analysis, basically each interview took at least 2 hours. They were meticulously transcribed to make sure that we got all the words correct. Then I used in vivo to assist me, so I didn't have to use all the cards and everything like in the old days. And so we wound up with a secular worldview tension, which I equated with the worldview community, the religious community identity. There's the self and how the individual identifies themselves. And then there's this process that's somewhere in the middle, and this may change a bit, but I labeled it conversion because that's when these things come together. And in that, then you find somewhere situated the full understanding of the person in relationship, who they are, and what, how they relate to the rest of the world, both within their religious group as well as the secular society. So I'll talk a bit about how these themes were clustered about by certain concepts, and then how those concepts were broken down into sub-concepts in just a second, and some very particular words that tended to show up in each one of these participants' discussion of those concepts. But let's turn first to just a couple of the findings, and there were many in this, particularly regarding views of the chaplaincy and of volunteers, but we'll restrict it to these areas here since this is the title of the paper. The exclusivist religious outlook, okay, the fact that my religion is the only one and all others are failing, did not necessarily lead to a rejectionist or a desire to go against the larger secular world. And I said, in a way that would be conducive to radicalization or terrorism. Well, what I meant there is this. In other words, they might be exclusive. They might have also coded rejectionists, although there were few of those that did, that I'll show a second in a chart. But even those that were exclusive and rejectionist, over half of those would have been considered someone that was passive. They just more or less said, okay, that's the world and I'm going to back out of it. I'm going to live my life and let the rest of the world do their thing. So if they had been someone that would have been very visible to radicalization, they would have been the type that would have been active either in their speech or active in demonstrating some sort of behavior against it. The exclusivists, mainly, and by and large, most of the inmates coded to be exclusive because of the concepts they use and the words they use, found a way to be in the world but not of the world. In other words, yes, we're here, but we can manage our lives in a way to take care of our needs that every human being needs, yet we can also serve the spiritual and religious needs of the divine. Or they chose to just simply keep their own beliefs to themselves and just kind of isolate themselves in their communities. One interesting area that I want to go and study in a few years is in northwest Arkansas. That's called the Purple People, who are a religious group that basically have brought together some Hindu concepts, some Islamic concepts, as well as Christian concepts. And they are isolated in a village, and they allow people to come in and buy products. They make things, manufacture things. And they will allow people to convert to their religion, but they don't go out and proselytize. I mean, they more or less isolate themselves. So, surprisingly, exclusivist undertones were detected in the majority of the narratives, as I mentioned a second ago, rather than inclusive. And surprising in light of media reports regarding fears of radicalization in prison through Islam, more Muslims coded inclusive and incorporationist than did the Christians. And I really didn't know what to expect there, but going by what media tells us all the time, we're bombarded by it. Going by Senate panel reports, going by Pete King's investigations and so forth in Congress, that really has gone against the grain, and I've really had to work in how I have addressed this with many different groups of my friends that are in law enforcement and so forth, because they say, hey, you've got to be wrong. This needs to be duplicated, right? It really needs to be duplicated. But still, again, that was my finding after hours and hours of tedious reading, coding, going back and recoding, moving about clusters, trying to collapse clusters, and come up with a good objective finding. So, to demonstrate some of these, as you can tell, we've got the exclusivists, right? The majority, over twice as many exclusive as to be inclusive. Total in 22. Those exclusive Muslim, 6. Exclusive Christian, 9. Inclusive Muslim, 5. Over double inclusivist Christian. This one's a bit more demonstrative. As to the frequency of distribution of religious community identity and the worldview, right? Interacting in the world compared to their religious understanding of themselves. For Muslims who were inclusivist, incorporationist, 4 times that of Muslim inclusivist, rejectionist. If you note here, everyone has a 1. I did not plan it, I assure you. When we look at Christian inclusivist, incorporationist, 1. Christian inclusivist, rejectionist, 1. Muslim exclusivist, incorporation, 5. Rejectionist, 1. Christian exclusivist, 8. Rejectionist, 1. Excuse me, exclusivist, 8. Again, total in, all accounted for. What was interesting here is that in the inclusivist, these were the ones that that basically took a public and legal stance to any type of change that they felt they needed to occur in the worldview. When it came to the exclusive Muslim, that one individual, the terminology and words that they used to describe their response to overall society in rejecting it was in the midst of a cluster about issues of race and issues of culture. Now that was interesting because when it came to the Christian exclusivist, that was also rejecting, who by the way was there for bombing several federal buildings and setting fire to government property and police departments and so forth and so on, and spoke of terms that when when he got out, his followers would still be there, by the way, and he may have been leading me on, but I spent a lot of time talking with the children. He spoke in terms of politics. Politics justified his understanding of the larger society. But for the Muslim, it was culture and race that justified his rejecting of the larger society. Okay. So, remember, I had the themes. I had the world, the community, religious community, the world view community, the self, and then somewhere in this conversion is where everything intercepts. I'm thinking about modifying that a bit, but when we look, or when I looked at the narratives, 4 main clusters appeared. Clusters around concepts of strain, of desire, of helpers, and of transformation. Strain, right? Basic Agnew general strain. Prison is a straining, tensive situation. There's fear, there's anger, there's hatred, there's labels, there's segregation within the group, right? Gays of types of crimes are segregated from the rest, looked down upon, etc. The whole process of prisonization. The desire was expressed, and this is almost 100% of the 22 individuals. The desire arose from strain in 2 forms. So we've got a nuance here. We've got our first form. The desire for change of self, which would be transformation, which tended to link with actual conversion, changing myself, changing something about me. And the second type of desire, change, was to change my situation, to change my circumstances. In other words, the discussion and the narrative said we're not really focusing on changing ourselves, and this is not what they told me, of course. This is deep meaning that I had to pull forward. But the focus was on changing the circumstances, managing the prison situation for my safety, for whatever. So I can go into many different means of doing that, which should be splashed right in between here. Religion is only one means. Okay? It's one treatment program, if we want to look at it from that standpoint. Other means of change and desire could be through prison gangs. That would be antisocial. Other pro-social would be what? Education, counseling, anger management, job training within the prison setting. So there are a number of different, again, forks. Religion only being one means in that number of forks in which the individual can attempt then to exercise that desire toward change. Now, it's not enough to have the means. Religion alone, okay, was expressed as being insufficient in itself because religion meant accountability, it meant community, it meant understanding, it meant being responsible to others, it meant duty to others. And these individuals all expressed that they did not have that. That was a problem in their life. They did not have the need to be responsible, etc. So religion linked, though, with a process, a social process, a structure linking with a social process, okay, who you associate with. Helpers. Helpers could have been, as some said, and they said often there was some problematics with those. These individual types of helpers were often linked to gangs, was other prisoners themselves. Okay? Other prisoners on the block that might assist in some sort of a religious or spiritual transformation. Good potential to be misled because of their lack of knowledge, for example. But other helpers were volunteers. Guess who ranked lowest in helpers in religion? In every one of their discussions, the chaplains. Not because the chaplains were not good-hearted, not because the chaplains wouldn't help them get the things they needed, because the chaplains were agents of the state and the chaplains were doing paperwork. And the chaplains, in my interviews, voiced the same thing. Okay? And by the way, this is confirmed by Mark Ham's study in 2006, as well as in the Pew study in December. So, we've got the helpers. They're important for supporting, for motivating, to instilling commitment, treatment, right? As you do this, you move into a new group setting in the religious group. You disassociate old friends, because you have to remove yourself from the gang, and that's very problematic, it's all expressed. Blood out, blood in. Blood in, blood out. But in addition to that, the inspiration and so forth comes from the fact that then you form those new controls through new associations within the group of the religious setting, right? So that leads then to the end result of the transformation, which all said that's continual. It cannot be broken. It cannot be broken by exit and re-entry. You've got to have something in place when you leave that's associated with volunteers and so forth on the outside to carry that person on. Because otherwise, you go back to your same old friends. Society rejects you, they said. We can't walk out of this religious setting into most religious settings in the free world because they still look at us as convicts. We don't, as has been said before, we don't have that good process to break down and bring us back into the society that we have of placing the label of criminal on the person from the day they're arrested through their showing up at the jail. So that's basically the follow-up there. It's much nuanced because the fact that I didn't mention there, but there are several different helper types. Ham study concluded at least 4. I concluded 4. And by the way, the Pew study also concluded that there were several. Pew did not get to visit with the inmates themselves. Pew had to do all their interviews with the chaplains across the 50 states. But there was confirmation of my findings, and my findings confirmed some things that Mark Ham found also. His was in the West, mine was in the Northwest, Pew was across the nation. So lots of things that need to be done. In wrapping this up, there's some shortfalls. It needs to be duplicated, and I'd love to work with anybody who wants to do that. I'll share my RRB stuff. I'll share the questionnaires and all, and just ask that we coordinate things and try to build some data. The prison that I work with is interested in me developing a scale of about 6 questions that can be placed within an intake device that after the individual becomes religiously affiliated with the chaplaincy, that can be administered in several stages through exit. If they come back, it can also then serve as some sort of a check and balance as to maybe what went wrong. And in that way, start to create some quantitative data that could go into a database. So I know I squeezed a lot in there. But anyway, that's it. I break there.